I call this one Apologize to Her. This one I had to re-record because I've left out some details, and some of these details are very intricate to show how abuse is a gradual process, and then how parents give permission to other adults to abuse children. I had to have been about 15 or 16 years old at the time. I was in high school, and I had just moved to Brampton, but I was still coming back to some parts of the old neighborhood that I grew up in. And, when you move to Brampton, a place like Brampton, it has a very different mentality and psychology, even up until now. This was the 90s, but, you move from the inner city to a place like Brampton, and you have a lot of people who've moved out of the city areas also into places like Brampton and Mississauga. And a lot of those parents and grandparents, if they're immigrants, they're like the first gen that came to Toronto, and a lot of them know each other from the 70s and earlier. So it's very interesting to see the next gen growing up in suburban areas. And at the time, I met a friend who she was raised quite young in Brampton, so we kind of clicked that way. And her mother was a braider. Her mother braided hair, her mother braided hair, or had a family friend that braided hair, and I wanted to get braids. So this is right before like a back to school time period. And she was Nigerian, and her mom had met me and had quite a few questions, because a lot of Nigerians that came to Toronto in the 70s, early 80s, a lot of them went to school here. So they went to college or university. And she had asked me my last name, which is it's pretty common for especially African immigrants to know other African children just like their children. And the minute I told her my last name, she knew exactly who my dad was. And she asked me specific questions, and I tried to skirt around some of the responses, and she came out directly and was like, "Wait a minute, is your dad Mr. So and so? Did he go to York University? And was he married to a lady named," and he said my biological mother's name. And I was like, "Well, yeah," because I knew that information. And I think I was so hesitant not to answer, but I hesitated in that, how could one person know so much about my family from many, many years prior? And how did she know these details when she wasn't really a direct friend to my dad? And I realized, with this type of information, news travels very, very quickly. And so, I said to her, yeah, that's the case. But, in my home, we don't really talk about this. And she didn't quite take that hint. And so, after I got my hair done, we actually went to the post office in a specific neighborhood I used to live in growing up. And this friend, her mom worked for Canada Post. So we were waiting around at this specific location for my stepmom to come and pick me up. And my stepmom arrived to the scene, and we decided on a location to meet up, and it happened to be the old neighborhood I grew up in. The friend, her mom worked for Canada Post, so we were decided to meet at that Canada Post location, and my stepmom was supposed to come pick me up there. And so when my stepmom arrived, this friend's mother says, you must be so proud as her stepmother. And she says, you did a really good job. She's a really great girl. She's really nice. She's very respectful. As her stepmom, you must be very, very proud. And I was like looking at this lady, because I didn't tell her all that, but she took it out of context in the sense that she kept repeating it over and over again. And my stepmother looked shocked and angry. And she just kind of politely nodded and said, thank you. And then a few hours later, she had a private discussion with my dad about this exchange. And it was weird because on the drive home, she was silent in the car. She didn't say anything to me. And I had this weird angst, like I wasn't supposed to disclose any kind of information about the fact that I was a stepchild. And here again, over the course of 30 years, there's a constant reminder that I had to be silent about that part of my life, but it wasn't even bad, and it had nothing to do with me, really. But I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of people who knew my parents back in the day, they were just surprised to be seeing this new person because they knew the old person. And it was kind of loosely my responsibility to keep that hidden. And I say this to say, sometimes when you're dealing in toxic families, the scapegoat is usually forced to stay in the shadows and remain hidden, and to also hold back the truth about a lot of things. And whether or not the original story is bad or good, no child should have to live in the shadows of a part of their life that was hidden, even if it was hidden from their parents, you know? So my stepmom now has a private conversation with my dad, and they're talking about whatever just transpired. And then my dad called me over and sat me down and told me that I had embarrassed her and I made her feel bad, and she was crying and crying and crying. And basically my dad told me to apologize to her for embarrassing her. And I was so shocked, because it's like, if this life story of mine was a secret, why am I being forced to walk as if I'm a secret when I'm here? I exist. And my life story continues on, even though this ended between my biological parents. And so he told me to apologize to her. And I just felt so hurt, because it's like, well, why do I have to apologize about something that's a truth? So here another topic comes up again about speaking the truth and being punished for speaking the truth. I realized too, like in Canada, we make jokes about Canadians always apologizing for everything. And I laugh, because even though that's a hidden joke, that's a Canadian thing, I realized that at that age is when I was being taught how to apologize for things, even if it wasn't my fault and I wasn't responsible for anything. I realized that my father, in those moments, gave her permission to suppress me with a different kind of abuse. And then over the years, due to his unwillingness to face the truth about his dishonesty, which is like not speaking the truth about the things that happened before he married my stepmother. It was a betrayal, like a lifelong betrayal that left scars long enough to continue the subversive injury for decades to come. And, I was about 15 or 16 at the time. I didn't even know how to describe what I felt, but I felt unsafe. Looking back, I felt abandoned because the truth was void in this whole scenario. I felt disrespected. I felt alone. And, I felt abandoned by two parental figures in their ongoing projection about something that should have been between them. So in the end, I'm saying this to say, dishonesty hurts everyone, especially the children. And I don't think it's something that I had to go through. But this scenario shaped the rest of my life with my stepmother. And it was like a hidden, it's a hidden kind of backstabbing action in that I confirmed the truth with a person on the outside of the family cult, literally.